Roberto, our director of DFIR.
All right, hello everybody. Can everyone hear me? Okay. All right, guys. Sorry to keep you waiting. We're just working out a couple details here, getting everything in order. But we have a pretty cool workshop today for you guys. Hopefully, you'll all get a chance to participate and learn something from it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, everybody. So today we're going to be discussing the ELK stack. So this is something that I spoke about a little bit in our last presentation. If any of you guys had the opportunity to attend, we had a presentation earlier this week discussing the SIM, the SOAR, XDR, and a couple other related tools for detection and incident response. Our last presentation was earlier this week dealing with the SIM, the SOAR, a couple other related components like the more recent XDR and sort of the direction that's moving towards. So today, I wanted to go a little bit more detail into the ELK stack, and I'll be sharing some information along with a few other members from our research team from the DFIR FAST server. And we're going to be talking about the ELK, specifically the ELK stack. This is a open source SIM solution that is able to do a lot of what the really powerful, more expensive proprietary solutions can do, but in an open source fashion, giving you guys that same kind of capability, but without the cost and financial overhead. So it's a little bit more accessible, and I think it has a lot of value to offer. So a couple quick introductions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Norberto. I'm the director of the DFIR research team. And we worked on this along with another member of our team, Shay. Unfortunately, she's not able to make it today. She was due to illness. But in addition, we will also be having my research assistant, Anushka Garg, and Dan Ortiz, who is another graduate student, and he's part of our research team as well. And he'll be talking with you guys a little bit later about setting that up, configuring the essentials of the ELK stack, kind of giving, and we're going to be giving you guys some guidance in terms of what sort of direction you guys can take that, and the possibilities of what ELK has to offer. So it's kind of a lot of information. There is really a pretty broad breadth of capabilities for this. So in order to kind of focus in our discussion, we're going to be using actually a scenario that we kind of just made up based on some previous actual incidents that have occurred in the past. So if you guys are registered into the FAST server, the main general FAST server, you can go ahead and find a PDF version of our threat intel report. And you can go over that later if you'd like in a little more detail. But we will be using that kind of as a backdrop for the context of some of the things that we'll be talking about today. So quick little brief rundown. This is some of the topics that we'll be discussing. And so beginning with ELK, how to configure it, sort of the inspiration for our made-up scenario, the components, recent changes, and variations actually to the ELK stack that do have some pertinence to DFIR, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the discussion. So first, just a quick recap on the kill chain, the cyber kill chain. This is something that we mentioned briefly in our earlier presentation this week. But for any of you guys that weren't able to attend, or just to give you a little bit of refresher for the parts of it that are relevant to our talk today, The cyber kill chain is essentially just a model for how to reason and think about a cyber attack, kind of putting yourself in the attacker's shoes and thinking about some of the steps that an attacker would need to take in order to successfully initiate an attack into like a corporate network or organization, government, nonprofit, or otherwise. But what this essentially means for attackers is this kind of provides a blueprint for how to perform a successful exploitation. Obviously, this doesn't cover everything. It's just kind of a general model, but it is kind of a good rough idea of more or less what to expect and how to go about coming up with your own unique elements for each of these slots here. And then for defenders, what's important to note about this kill chain is that essentially the way that you can perform a successful defense, your goal in analyzing the cyber kill chain, sorry about that. Yeah, your goal is basically to get ahead of the attacker, find out where they are in the sequence of events, in the sequence of attacks, which of course could vary. It could be several different possibilities in terms of, for example, what sort of exploit they're going to be using, where and when the installation be taking place. But having a rough idea of where they are in their process gives you the ability to kind of jump ahead of that, set up roadblocks, cut connections, and basically inhibit their progress along the way. And so since today we're going to be really talking mostly about detection and incident response, less so about hardening, although that does play a major role with the kill chain as well. But incident response is basically, and threat detection is what's going to give us the insight to be able to pivot our resources, whether it be an organization or, again, company, government, nonprofit, that whatever organization is that you're dealing with gives you a better context of where things are at in situation awareness and how to deploy your resources to deal with the threat as it's ongoing. Yeah, you know what? We were having some issues with that earlier as well. I do actually more suggest if you have like an existing Kali installation that you would maybe want to experiment with, that would probably be better. Unfortunately, we were trying to bake together a updated version. That one was working as of a couple of days ago, but I think it was kind of pushing the border in terms of resources, and it ended up crashing on us. So if you are having issues with that, I would just recommend using maybe an existing Kali if you have one. And you can, if you don't want to mess with your current configuration, you can use the snapshot feature. And that unfortunately might be the best way to go about it at the moment. But we'll be providing a recording. So if any of you guys maybe want to go through this later on in your own time, you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to help and offer some guidance there as well. All right. Yeah, my apologies for that, folks. So we're having some technical difficulties, but I still encourage you all to follow along if you can through your own installations. Ideally, this workshop is actually kind of more targeted towards an audience that's going to be building it from scratch, from the ground up. Yeah, do stay tuned for that. And later on, we will try to go ahead and push out an updated version of the OVA. So if you guys want to just kind of play around with one that's already configured and don't want to, mess around with the configuration aspect of it and building it from the bottom, and just kind of want to explore with the possibilities and some of the dashboards that you can put together, make it unique to your own environment, you can definitely do so later on as well. So yeah, for here, I will be passing it over to our Associate Anushka in a moment. But just a quick rundown of what is ELK. As I mentioned before, the ELK stack, as it kind of suggests in the title, it stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, and Beats, which was not in the original acronym because it's a component that came later on. But it is one that provides a lot more granularity and a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do with your ELK stack, giving you functionality, for instance, of taking in the logs of, say, your firewall, different tools, a lot of the newer tools that are coming out. They do have Beat equivalents, and you can configure different types of beats in order to use those different types of logs and feed information into your either Logstash or Elasticsearch. And my colleague will be explaining what the difference is between those in a moment. But for now, what you need to know is that this was built by Elastic. There's 4 major components. And these components happen to be uniquely positioned in a way that you could use them together to emulate a threat detection tool, other SIM products such as Splunk. This actually offers a lot of the same benefit without the cost, as I mentioned earlier. So that's what we'll be exploring it today. So yeah. So why ELK? Again, one of the primary reasons being its robustness and open source. It does come with a little bit of configuration strain at the beginning. Once you're able to get past that, it does offer a wide range of flexibility and capabilities. So some common use cases for this in a security environment would be continuous monitoring of, say, critical assets in your network, customer data that you want to make sure is protected, threat hunting scenarios, that's an incident response investigation, as well as automated threat protection, which kind of leans into a little bit of SOAR functionality as well, which for any of you those that attended our presentation earlier this week, you'll recall that the SOAR is security orchestration and automation response. It works hand in hand with the SIM in order to actually remedy a lot of these lower level issues automatically. So in a nutshell, you can kind of think of these as your telemetry, your pre-detection, your post-detection, and your automated response. Okay, and then here I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our colleague Anushka. You just see how to.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you,
switch gears.
It's okay. You can switch the presentation slides. Hello. Hi, am I audible?
You would have to screen share herself.
Okay.
Which I did make her co-host, so she could do that if she wants.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now, and then Anushka,
No, it's okay. It's okay. Hello.
Feel free to share your screen, and if you can just go ahead and walk through, help to explain to our guests a little bit more detail what the ELK stack consists of.
Hi, am I audible? Hello.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So okay, going with the I'm not able to do it full screen.
If you click on slideshow at the top right, it should go full screen. Right. Yeah, right there.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, going with the going forward with the major components of ELK. We have four major components, that is Beats, Longstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana. So talking first about the Beats, it is the first and the lowest level of our stack that we are going to discuss and everything. We will configure things and we can see the outputs to collect the data from the beats. Beat come up with the different shapes and the size and the variety. We have different versions of beat that we'll be covering today. That will be ORDIC beat, metrics beat, and the packet beat. And the it's just the admin's choice to of beat largely determines the type which log gather, and by extension the types of indices and virtualization that are generated from that. Contrary to what we may see in the intuitive, this is usually one of the last components that are installed on a stack. Going forward with the Longstash, Longstash is basically the open source data collection engine with real-time pipelining capabilities. It is the next lowest level of a stack, long of a stack after beats. This component will sometimes act as an intermediary between the beats and the Elasticsearch, and other times it will act as the similar role as that of beats. It will work strongly with the Elasticsearch and the Kibana synergy, and it dynamically unifies the data from disparate source and normalizes the data into the destination of our choices. It has over 200 plugins which we use, and using the data engineering terminology, this would somewhat be called as a data pipelining, as I have already mentioned. And it will overall help in making it more useful without changing the values on the data. Moving forward with the Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is the third component in terms of logical structure of ELK stack. But first, we'll need to install it as it serve as the core for tall components to either feed into or stem out from. Simple way to think of this component is just like the AI brain being fed from the numerous and various different sources of data, and then we are collecting it and we are analyzing the data. Elasticsearch will store and perform the aggregation computation of the data, forming the association and the relationships. Example of the document database include some various famous one like MongoDB, Apache, CouchDB, and the Azure Cosmos. Moving forward with the Kibana. Finally, Kibana is the topmost layer of our stack and deals particularly with the graphical user interface and has the ability to build and display the custom dashboards to visually understand with the trends, patterns, and anomalies of our data. That will help us to gain the understanding of what's happening with the data and how we can use it in the further future. This component takes the scaffolding built by Elasticsearch indices and builds houses, yards, and pool to the on the foundation. To use the another analogy, this is the essential, the fantasy capstone of our ELK pyramid. If we imagine beads as a raw granule material, Longstash as a refinery, Elasticsearch as the modeling, then Kibana would be our statue, our final product, which we actually work on. So this is all about the four components of the ELK stack. Now moving towards the ELK recent changes and other details. I guess this Norbito or Dan can help me with that. Nor?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Anushka. So, picking up from there, just a couple quick recent changes and details pertaining to the ELK stack. Elastic Security is actually kind of the latest iteration of the ELK stack for security. So, kind of in similar vein to what ended up happening with Splunk. Elastic was more so used originally for data ingestion, pipelining, visualizations, for kind of just overall with the infrastructure and customer and data. But because of the way that it works, it was eventually adopted as one of the more popular SIM tools. And so in order to kind of tailor a little bit more to the audience, they recently came out with Elastic Security SIM, which is essentially the same components we'll be talking about today, but configured in a way that offers a little bit more out-of-the-box security and some unique functionality that helps security analysts perform their roles as threat detectors and incident responders. So one of the things that is new to Elastic Security is the fact that it incorporates endpoint detection, and it's able to do a lot of what we'll be trying to do manually today through kind of a simpler interface. It basically kind of facilitates the process of what we'll be discussing, as well as a new architecture system, which is the Fleet system. This is essentially the same as the Beats and Logstash connectivity to Elasticsearch, but now instead of Beats, they use what are called agents, and those again are deployed on systems, on tools, and they feed in data to Logstash or Elasticsearch in a Fleet's agent system. So it's essentially a new term for the same thing, but more so tailored for a security audience. So this was just set up in the past couple of years, so it's very new, but it is worth taking a look at if you guys find the topic matter of today something of interest. So another one that I wanted to mention that is relevant to our discussion is SOF ELK. So this is actually a security, short for Security Operations and Forensics. It's a ELK stack that has been uniquely already tailored to be used for incident response and security. So this actually came out before ELK Security, but it has its own unique way of doing things and its own take on the matter. And as with all ELK implementations, this is 100% free and open source. And it originally came out as part of a project for a SANS course, and is still being used in SANS courses today in order to teach people about ELK and incident response and threat detection. So here's some links if you guys want to take a screenshot. Otherwise, I will be posting the PDF for the presentation later on, and you're free to go ahead and check them out and learn a little bit more about that. You download a copy for yourselves and get up and running without having to go through the configuration that we'll be doing today. However, just note there is some value in knowing kind of how the cookie crumbles, so to speak, how it's set up. So in the event that maybe you may run into some issues, errors, it helps you to perform like root cause analysis a little bit better. It's always good to learn and do things manually and then use the automated tools that are available after that. Just gives a little bit more depth into the subject. So that's where we'll be going over the raw ELK stack today. But with that, before we get into our demo, I'd like to open it up for questions in case anybody had Any comments, concerns? Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves. And
In Norberto,
we'll take some of those now.
Norberto,
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. Can you give me an example of when an ELK stack might be used and when a soft ELK might be used? Like when the two different stacks, like how they might be similar, or like where their niche might make more sense in
Right,
a
sure.
real world
So where
application.
the overlap would be. 1 second, let me go ahead and speak without the echo. But yeah, I sort of get what you're getting at. To be honest, well, soft elk is sort of a specialized version of elk. Elk Stack originally was kind of a little bit more broad in terms of its application. So as I mentioned kind of briefly earlier, it was a little bit more so tailored for like a data engineering audience before. That would be used in cases like market research, um, product analysis, and things of that sort. But while it does offer some functionality for doing things like assessing your system CPU and health, and being able to detect when things are going awry, those features were sort of like an add-on that came later, and eventually, they got good enough that people started kind of putting them together on their own and trying to use that for security. And so what Soft Elk does is it basically takes the best of the security features and tries to put them all together in one place. And it just does that in a slightly different version, a slightly different way than the new Elk Security does. So they're both attempts to basically gather all of the beats, for instance, and that are a little bit more relevant to security incident response specifically. So there would be, I know that one of the functionalities that I came across that when I was doing my research for this, just to kind of give you like an example, Elk Security and Soft Elk, they both have a way to be able to detect malware beacons out of the box. So that's something that can be done, and we'll try to do that today with our raw configuration, but it's basically takes a lot more manual effort. You have to reach out into the individual pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, and Soft Elk and Elastic Security, they basically just have that already ready to go so that you can kind of focus a little bit more on your investigation and less so on configuring it and getting all the pieces together in order to be able to do incident response. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Then without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and we are going to get into our demo. So if you will just give me one quick sec to go ahead and get a file ready on my end. Can I switch control to you? Do you have? Okay, so we're going to be, oh, you know what? My apologies. We'll be leading into that in a second. Yeah, but before we get into our demo, maybe to kind of have a better understanding, this might be a good time to take a look at your threat intel reports. Again, it is a little bit thorough, so I mean, there's not really sufficient time at the moment to go into it in detail, but what you really need to know about that is just the context of our incident and what we'll be detecting. So if you guys have that available, you can go ahead and just skip over to the page that talks about attack sequence. And that's going to be near the end, I believe, page 8. 8 or 9, page 9, actually. This is gonna give you an idea of where we're going to be putting our detection tools and what we're going to be looking for. So kind of gives you an idea of what role they would play and where something like this might be useful. So yeah, to give you guys just kind of the quick and dirty of our scenario incident. Essentially, we have a series of attackers. They're launching an attack on companies that do undersea cabling, and the IoT sensors in this case have been compromised, pushing out false data that's inaccurate with the intent of triggering a response in their cloud infrastructure. So if you look at the page that I was describing, the attack sequence, that kind of gives you like a visual of the architecture that we're envisioning. So on the left, you'll see the IoT devices. And they're going to be feeding data into our Azure cloud infrastructure. And the infrastructure in this case is what we call in the data engineering world a Lambda architecture. So what you need to know about Lambda is you basically have a data pipeline, takes in data from devices or metrics, and you essentially have two avenues for your data. One that goes into real-time streaming. That's usually where machine learning is performed and function aggregations of data. And then you have the cold batch storage, which has its own unique purposes, but those are usually, that data is usually sent off-site to the local network of the organization. So where our investigation, I suppose, comes into play is going to be when the attacker gets through the cloud infrastructure, they're able to trigger a response that is that they were able to predict based on their research beforehand. And this response is essentially a notification to our backend developer. So the reasoning behind that being that they already have a command and control server ready to go, and they are intercepting this data, this email, in order to feed the backend dev with a phishing email. And it's going to be exactly the same email. And there's a screenshot of that a couple pages prior. But what you need to know is that the email is going to contain an attachment. That attachment is going to be our malware, and the malware is going to be what we're detecting. So moving right along, just an inspiration for our scenario. Without getting too into the weeds here, this was kind of loosely based on recent and not so recent set of attacks. One being the Stuxnet worm that was discovered in 2010. And if you guys go through the report, that's going to be a little bit more pertinent to the data poisoning part, the IoT to the cloud, which we won't be going into much detail today. But that is relevant in historical terms if you want to like learn a little bit more about how those have been done and how that works. And then the second inspiration was the SolarWinds breach, which happened a little bit more recently. If any of you guys plug into the news of cybersecurity, this was back in late 2020. SolarWinds, yeah. And so this was what has been since referred to as a supply chain attack. And what that means is basically that they were able to compromise the infrastructure that different tools and companies relied on by Trojanizing a software update. So imagine, you rely on, we'll say Wireshark for your security response. Wireshark is an open source tool. And somebody was able to get credentials to make updates to that software. With so many people relying on Wireshark, you can imagine a compromised Wireshark in a bunch of different infrastructure throughout a bunch of different organizations could actually be a huge attack space, so to speak. So you can compromise a lot of organizations in one go by attacking the underlying infrastructure of that organization. And that's what the software update is. And the second component that we'll be discussing is the malware beacon. Malware beacon, for those of you that are not familiar, it's basically any piece of malware that is that communicates to a command and control server. These are usually used as like a first stage of an attack to gather information, kind of basically spy on the devs' machines and gather their credentials, client data, maybe data on some of the business executives if they want to do like a big spear phishing attack, for instance. But a malware beacon is able to kind of stay below the radar in the background, gathering data and slowly but surely leaking it out to a pre-configured command and control server that usually uses that in their second phase of their attack. So this is ELK. He is our backend dev. And I've made reference to him several times in a report. He's got an email, he's got a GitHub account, and unfortunately, Elke, like many developers, I imagine in the industry, he, just like the rest of us, makes mistakes. Sometimes he gets lazy. Sometimes he tries to take shortcuts. Sometimes he's in a hurry to go watch the latest Game of Thrones episode or whatever. And so in this situation, in our scenario, Elke has stored his credentials in a text file, which is bad practice, and he's aware, but he's in a rush and he doesn't think there's any risk. Their systems are very secure. They do their routine security checks and red teaming, but unfortunately, phishing attack is something that is more of a psychological thing than a technical thing. So, he's vulnerable as any other person could be. So this is kind of a timeline of our scenario. Like I mentioned before, we had the data poisoning attack, the sensors sending false information. That information, it basically alerted the cloud infrastructure, triggered some automatic functions, and is sending an alert, an emergency alert to the backend dev, letting them know, hey, there's some abnormal activity on the sensors. It looks like maybe it could have been a shark attack, or it could have been maybe a storm that was going through the area. Something's happening. They need to look into it. Systems are going down for whatever reason. Now, in our case, being a data poisoning attack, this is actually not the case. But by sending the data as if it were the case, it triggers the response in the cloud infrastructure, causing it to go through a preset of steps in order to try to remedy the issue. So we have a poison attack, our emergency response is triggered, email is sent out to our developer, and the email is intercepted in a man in the middle that has enriched our email, we'll say, with a malware beacon. So the file attachment is opened. It's to the developer. He believes it's just a PDF file, offering some guidance, instructions, and context for the attack, so he knows what steps he needs to take. But to his knowledge, this PDF is actually a malware beacon. So our journey would begin here, right after the man in the middle has been compromised, and we are going to try to detect that. So as I mentioned before, malware beacons are usually used as a first stage of a larger attack that will typically be played out in stages, maybe 2 or 3. In our case, it's going to be a 2-step attack. The beacon is going to be collecting the credentials of our ELK developer, and with the stolen credentials, his GitHub, his email credentials, they are going to enter phase 2 of the attack, being the Trojanized software update. So you can imagine an attacker's got your credentials. They're able to log into your GitHub. They can push out malicious updates. And with your stolen email credentials, you can also notify all of your clients that they need to install that update as soon as possible, which is what's happening in our situation. Okay, and so we'll be getting to our demo very shortly, but just to prep you guys a little bit for that. These are some of the tools that we'll be needing to use for our Debian environment. ELK can run on many different types of Linux, flavors of Linux. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Debian-based installation, but the configuration steps that we'll be going over today do rely on the way that the Debian file system works, as well as some of the tools like the apt-get package manager. That's something that is unique to Debian based distros. Other distros use other package managers, but apt-get is what we'll be using today. systemctl is a tool that is going to help us to be able to enable, disable services, get the status of those services, and restart services if needed. And in terms of our directory structure, there's really, for each component, we're going to be configuring two files for the most part. There is a third, being the Elasticsearch certs folder. And the certs file actually contains our certificate authority to be able to download these tools and connect our tools to our Elasticsearch in a secure manner. So for the most part, most components are only going to be using the YAML file in their respective folder in the etc, under the etc folder, and the user/share folder. And then in this case, it's all Elasticsearch, but it might be AuditBeat or Logstash instead of Elasticsearch. It'll be the name of the component. And what's in the user share folder is essentially what's going to manifest our configuration. So we have a configuration that we'll set up first with the under the etc folders, and that's going to basically tell our computer, well, how we want ELK configured when we materialize it, and the user share will put that into action. Okay, so a quick demo. We'll be doing a quick demo shortly, just to kind of show you guys what a malware beacon would look like. I've already kind of gone through the scenario a bit, so I'll briefly be going over that to not waste too much time, and so we can get into the workshop component. But after our demo, we will be going over setup. There's some prerequisites that we'll be needing to install, certificate signing, and some of that fun sort of mundane stuff at times. But once we get through that, we'll go through our installation, configuration, and then enable our services. And then finally, we'll be able to log into Kibana on a web browser and explore some of the capabilities with that. So As Anushka had mentioned earlier, there is a particular order that we usually want to install Elasticsearch first, followed by Kibana, which is going to give us our visualization in our menus. And then Logstash is going to be one of the tools that we can use, but is not always required. But in our case, we'll go ahead and set it up because what Logstash has that will bring value to our situation of in our current scenario is it actually has a plugin for GitHub. So with Logstash, you can deploy that and you can set it to watch your GitHub account and any strange activity such as like our developer logging in after hours or making changes without requesting approval, things that are that would maybe indicate suspicious activity could be detected by the GitHub plugin for Logstash. And so that's where that would come into play. Other than that, we'll be spending most of our time with Beats. As Anushka had mentioned earlier, there's several different kinds of Beats, but we'll be focusing today on 3 particular ones for our environment. Okay, and so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into our demo. So if you just give me a quick second. All right, my apologies, folks. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. We're just able to get our beacon working just a second ago, but for some reason we're having issues now. So I think we're just going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So if you guys can just go ahead and get your Kali boxes ready. All right. Yeah, just go ahead and get those booted up and we'll be setting up the configuration in a moment.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yes.
All right, cool. So, hello, everybody. I'm Dan Ortiz, and I was fortunate enough to join this research team, and good job on Norberto for leading this way. He actually was the one that came up with the idea of the Elastic Stack and setting it up as a SIEM. So let's go ahead and get started. So we do have some notes. I don't think you can see it on my screen, but were you able to send the file over to yeah. Okay. So I guess if you guys oh wait, or did you want me to maybe post it on? Okay. So Norberto's about to drop a file on the Discord server so that you can see the instructions that I'm basically going to be leading with you guys. So I have installed a couple of things already on my machine. So apologies if I'm not actually going to be doing it. So first things first is what you always want to do is make sure that your packages are updated. So you're going to go sudo apt-get update and exactly this, but we're going to avoid upgrading right now. So I usually sudo apt update and then upgrade. And I hope that won't cause any problems downloading the JDK that we need in order to install the Elasticsearch. So I'm just going to do update, super secret password. Okay, and as you see, I have no packages update or ready for upgrade. So next, you are going to install the JDK, the Java JDK. So I believe we are using version 11, the Open JDK 11. So just that, and I messed up. Open JDK 11. My bad. Install. There you are. Okay, as I said, I have already installed it, and I guess I'll give you guys a minute or two for you guys. I think it was a fairly big package, so just let me know. I guess if I can get a thumbs up from the chat if anybody is ready. Okay, anybody in the room following along? Maybe could tell me if I good to go. Okay, cool. So next thing we are going to do is I actually need to copy and paste this over because it is a big line. Okay, so anybody familiar with the GPG command? How would I go about explaining GPG? So PGP, pretty good privacy, is a, I believe, encryption mechanism, right, Norberto? Or is that, yeah, right? Yeah, public-private key encryption. And so we need this key provided to us by Elastic for us to securely download their files and packages, because we will be installing a bunch of them. And then here at the very end, we will be installing app transport HTTPS, which allows us to communicate through HTTP over TLS. And like I said, I already have it, so I'm just going to go ahead and say no. There, I said no. So like that. Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Oh, God, you're not happy. All right. Then we will be adding this key to our source list. So I'm going to post another command on the chat. And I don't know if you heard me whisper, but this is essentially just adding their key to your source list. It's the way we download packages. Okay. All right, so I'm going to assume that that's taken care of. So now we are going to be going in as root user because we're going to actually be using sudo a lot, and I'd rather not just keep typing sudo. So I'm just going to switch over to super user, and here I am in the root shell. And what we're going to want to do now is sudo apt-get install Elasticsearch. And like I said, I already have it, so nothing will happen. But that should take some time. I know Elasticsearch is a pretty big package, and depending on your internet, that could take a while. So yeah, we're just going to sit here. And I will be posting that in the chat. So again, if you didn't switch over to super user, I guess you can just do sudo apt-get install
All right, guys. And just while you're having that download, I just want to let you know we do have an instruction file that we're trying to get pushed out to you guys. For some reason, Discord seems to be rejecting it, but it's up. Yeah. Okay. All right. Scratch that. Looks like we were able to get it up in the general. In the fast server. So if you guys want to go ahead and take a look at that, download it on your machines, and you guys can just go ahead and follow along, copy and paste, and that way it'll be a little bit simpler for you guys. And in the event that we're not able to finish today, you'll have that for reference for the future if you want to continue along the workshop. So that's it from me. I'll talk a little bit about the malware beacon a little bit later, but I'll go ahead and pass it back to Dan.
Thank you. So you guys shouldn't have received any problems with that, but if you did, please let me know in the chat. I know I ran into some Java issues, and all I had to do was a simple command that will switch over JDK versions. Okay, so now we're going to see Elasticsearch is in here. So, nope, it's using systemctl. That is not Kibana. Elastic. Boom. So so the command I typed in right now is to just see the services running on the Linux machine, and you probably will see something like Elasticsearch loaded. So just loaded in all gray. You don't see no active running or anything like that, and that's completely fine. Like I said, I just have it up. So yeah, I think that's fine. And I'm going to finish configuring up Elasticsearch. So another reason why you're going to need to be a super user, or at least just keep typing sudo, is because you are not allowed to go into the configuration files for these services unless you are root. So I'm going to go cd etc Elasticsearch, excuse me. Okay, and when you list the directory, you're going to see a bunch of files, but the one we mostly care about is the elasticsearch.yml file, or YAML. And this is just simply the configuration file for the Elasticsearch. So I use Vim. Just use your favorite text editor. Nano is always cool too, if you're not familiar with Vim. So, boom, here we are. So we come up here. I believe in the text file, it mentions installing Kibana and Logstash first, but we're just going to configure Elasticsearch because that's going to be the main thing. Okay. Okay. Sorry, give me 1 second. I need to move some stuff around. Okay. So cluster name, not that important right now, but you could rename it to whatever you'd like. So we have it as Kali ELK. I believe this was originally uncommented. So if you have that commented, go ahead and uncommented. Come down to the node name, because we're only going to have one node. It's going to be ELK-1. And we're going to believe that was also uncommented. And we're going to come down here, and this is the biggest part of configuring the Elasticsearch, is we're going to put network host over to not local host, but oops, excuse me, 000. Guess I can do that for you. Okay, we're going to make sure our port is at 9200, although it is already in default, so you don't need to uncomment it. I do, just because I'd like to see it. And then we're going to come down, not using discovery seed host. Sorry, I was just testing something a little earlier. But we are going to want to add this line, discovery.type : single node. And I believe on the on the instruction file, it says simple node, but we meant to say single node. I apologize. Okay. And then lastly, I know it doesn't say it on the configuration file, but we're going to go ahead and disable the security feature. I know it's pretty ironic. You only really need to turn this one false, but I was running into some issues earlier, so I set everything false. You don't need to do that, it's unnecessary. This is the only thing you need to do. So yeah. And after you're done doing that, for Vim, we're gonna WQ it. Okay. And we're gonna restart the service after we finish up changing the configuration file. So that command is systemctl restart Elasticsearch. I wonder, did we put that on the oh, we have the, what's up? Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. I see. Okay. So actually, I missed one step. We're going to want to enable the service first. So systemctl enable search.service. And like I said, already have it running. And then we will hit start. But I am going to type restart just because. Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think it ignores white space like that. All right, so I apologize for that. We're going to go ahead and try to see if configuring Kibana would help us out with this issue, suggested by one of my other research colleagues. So, all right. So now to install Kibana, what we're going to want to do again is apt-get install Kibana. And yeah, so go ahead. I don't think that'll do anything for me. Yeah, that won't do anything for me. Okay, and I don't think there was any other step here. So now we're going to go ahead and go over to the Kibana directory. And when you list it, you're going to see a lot less files than when you did in the Elastic. But again, that YAML file we are going to open. So I'm going to be using Vim. Doesn't work out. Okay, and as you see in the instructions, we are going to be changing the server port to nothing. Oh, it says HTTP port. We meant the server port. And we are just going to leave it defaulted to 5601. And then over at the server.host, we are going to change that over to 0.0. Okay. Again, you could name the server name if you like, but that's not necessary. And give me 1 second. Oops, sorry about that. I'm not going to want to comment that. Yeah, the main things were to get that server port and server host going. Server name's optional. And give me another.
That's more like and the metric read is kind of like watching the whole of your CPU. Yeah, there's some log, especially incorporating syslog into metric read. That's part of ours.
It's actually recommended that you don't use syslog simply because it produces so many logs that it would use up your storage so much so quickly. It's recommended you don't, or if you do, you have some sort of filtering mechanism off the system.
server? Yeah, metric. It's metric D. Metric B. Metric B. Yeah. Does metric B allow you to consult specific ones? It'll have to be done through Elasticsearch when you set up your indices. Are you attending the workshop? I was in Swift right now. I just wanted to see how things are going. Oh, okay. For sure. Well, yeah, if you don't mind, we're gonna go and get back to it though, because we're in the middle of a workshop right now. So. Yeah, really. Yeah, no worries. I mean, if you know, you're welcome to join our meetings. We'll be able to answer any questions that way. Just be a little bit better for the rest of the group. You know?
Also, do you remember the VMware stuff on the
Like about the details?
yeah, because I don't remember how to register. I'm trying to get VMware for some people.
Yeah, so there's
The right
that's
I apologize. So
But I would
give us
say-
a-
Okay, guys, so sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that, folks. We're just had a guest come into our room. He's asking some questions about the workshop. But yeah, to not keep you guys held up too much longer, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that one of the since it seems like we're having a little bit of difficulty with the overall configuration, just to kind of give you guys like a broad understanding of kind of what the direction that we had intended for this, since it does seem like we are a little bit low on time. We likely will not be able to finish the entire configuration. It can be a little bit of time consuming process, but we will be submitting an updated OVA early next week. And in the meantime, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, after the installation of Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Logstash, our goal was to go ahead and install Audit D. Audit D is a auditing service that is used on Linux systems, and it basically can track user login information. If, for instance, you may have multiple authentication failures or access to files or things of that nature, that is when you would be able to take advantage of Audit Beat's functionality. Audit D's functionality. And what Audit Beat does is that incorporates Audit D, the logs from Audit D, as well as system logs and some other sources that kind of give like a little bit of a more comprehensive look into the same type of data that Audit D tries to look at. So for the purposes of our workshop today, what we wanted to do was to use Audit D in order to monitor our downloads file using the malware beacon that we had set up beforehand. We were going to have that basically issue out the names of the files in that folder. And if you take a look at the packet, there actually is a screenshot of when we were kind of experimenting with that earlier. And that is essentially how that would work. And Audit Beat, with the help of Audit D, would be able to track that activity and send an alert to the ELK system admin. So moving right along from there, we have our next most relevant beat in this situation would be our packet beat. And packet beat, as is probably familiar to any of you guys that have dealt with packet captures, tools such as Wireshark or other related, maybe Nessus, also deals with PCAP files. But what Packet Beat will do for you is actually take a live packet capture, which is a feature that's only available on Linux, actually, with the particular module, the AF packet, I believe, but it should be listed on the document. So once we have our updated version, we'll let you guys know if we have made any changes to the document as well, in case you guys want to go ahead and follow along on your own. But otherwise, we'll have a freshly baked one out for you guys early next week. So yeah, what Packet Beat would have done in our situation, in our scenario, it would have been able to show when the beacon was issuing commands and the IP address that it was connecting to on the other side of the C2 client malware beacon type of relationship. So fortunately, we were able to get that working, but demo gods are not in our favor today. So we will be pushing out an update later. But that was essentially the direction we wanted to go with that. Once you have that set up, it would be a simple matter of logging into your browser, typing in localhost, and then the port number 5601, and that would provide you with the dashboard menu where you're able to configure your indices, kind of set up how you want the data organized, focus in on which you want to explore, if you want to do any filtering, and you want to create any custom dashboards, pie charts, bar charts. And there's a lot more elegant and complex visualizations as well. But in addition to some of the ones that come in by default when we go through the configuration in the YAML files for a lot of these beats, and I believe Logstash as well, there's usually an option there to enable default load default dashboards, and you can kind of use that as an opportunity to get started and use some of the things that have been built before you kind of dive in and start building your own unique dashboards. So that's kind of where we were going with that. And as far as the beacon was concerned, I believe I already explained that a little bit. Only other thing I think worth mentioning at this point would be phase 2 of our attack scenario would have been detecting the user activity, not only on the system, but also on the GitHub account for our ELK user. So we did actually have a GitHub account specifically made for this hypothetical user, as well as an email account. And by being able to monitor the activity on the local machine using again Audit Beat, but only this time for slightly different purpose. Instead of monitoring our downloads folder where we're watching for activity on that folder, execution, file access, new files created, deleted, modified, we would be assessing user activity and particularly paying attention to the time of login. If we would have a little bit more time, that would have been basically the tell that this was not a normal email being sent out, or a normal login to the machine for pushing out code to the GitHub, because it would have been taking place outside of our hypothetical backend developers' normal business hours. So Elasticsearch has a lot of cool features in terms of being able to correlate, aggregate the data. And so, for instance, being able to get those logs and then also being able to have them timestamped by Elasticsearch, that could kind of give you a little bit more additional insight into what's going on as well. So yeah, once these indices are, once the Elasticsearch infrastructure is ready to go, then you can really like kind of go wild in terms of how you want to create your indices, how you want to customize your environment in order to specifically hone in on factors that are relevant to your particular incident. So, yep, I think that's going to be it for now. If you guys have any questions, I apologize, it did not go quite as we intended, but we will follow up with you guys shortly. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to send those out now in the chat, or go ahead and unmute your mics, and we'll be taking those now.
We really appreciate it, guys. Again, apologies. So take care.